Thank you for being here on Memorial Weekend, and we're super excited, just as a family. Our son Preston, our number 6 child, graduated high school on Thursday night, and that is, So it has been a journey. Our oldest son, Brandon, is here on the aisle. He started school in September of 1988. So we have had a child in school for 31 years. Tracy and I are now free. We're free. You need to start wondering from week to week if we're even going to show up. It's like, we're done. We're done. But in that, our family is down here celebrating Preston's graduation. And we have the privilege of having our second oldest, Pastor Kyle, pastors in Montana. And Pastor Kyle's bringing us a word this morning. And I can't even tell you how good the word is. If it even wasn't from my son, it's a word from the Lord today. And I just encourage you to absorb all you can from this. And we welcome our son, Pastor Kyle, to the stage.
Well, good morning. It is great to be here with you guys this morning. It's fun to see what you guys have done with this church and this building in the last couple of years. Even just last year at Parker's graduation to now, you guys have done so much, and it's amazing. And so glad to be here. It's just kind of wild and surreal to preach at Mom and Dad's church. I know where I got started preaching was I accidentally became a pastor at my dad's church up in Montana by I substitute taught for our youth pastor who got stuck overseas for a while. Long story short, I went into my dad's office and stole old sermon notes, studied them, and started preaching them. And so it's just kind of surreal years later to be able to be a part of the ministry that he has here and be able to teach and share God's word with you. It's exciting to be here. It's fun to have the family together, and excited to be with you guys this morning. If you have your Bibles, you can open up to the book of Mark, chapter 4, is where we're going to read a few verses this morning. We're going to start in verse 35. We'll read this brief story, and then we'll pray and just walk through what I believe God wants to teach us here this morning. So Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35, says, "As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, 'Let's cross to the other side of the lake.' So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat, which, full disclosure, I was studying in another translation, and it said Jesus was asleep on the stern. No idea what a stern is. So thank God for the NLT. Helps those of us that are not nautical to know what the stern is. It's the back of the boat. He was asleep with his head on a cushion. The disciples woke him up shouting, 'Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?' When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, 'Silence, be still.' Suddenly the wind stopped and there was a great calm. Then he asked them, 'Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?' The disciples were absolutely terrified. 'Who is this man?' they asked each other. Even the wind and the waves obey him." We see a story this morning of Jesus, his followers in a boat, great storm. We see their brief interaction and how Jesus responds to that. We're going to pray, and then we're going to make some observations about the storm. And I don't know your story. I don't know most of your names this morning, but I know that we have a God who knows you, who is acquainted with your circumstances. And perhaps this morning you've got your own storm of sorts. Whether your storm is finances, storm could be relationships, storm could be related to decisions you have to make, could be marriage, could be romance, could be physical health. But whatever storm you're in this morning, I just want to make a few observations about Jesus and his interaction with his followers who are also in a storm. Let's pray. Father, love you. Thank you so much for your word. Thank you that it is alive and it is active and it is consistently speaking to humanity in different seasons of life, different circumstances of life. Father, I thank you that although I don't know the stories represented in these seats this morning, that you know them fully. And I thank you that you are engaged and you are active and you are speaking life and future and hope. I pray that this morning we wouldn't just learn more information about a story that took place, but we would know the person of Jesus greater, that we would have a personal interaction, a personal experience with you here today. Lord, I pray that you encourage those that need encouraged, that you challenge those that need to be challenged, and that you speak to us individually. Help our hearts to be open and receptive to you this morning, and just give me clarity and communication. You're awesome, God. We love you. It's your name we're gathered. It's your name we pray. And City Church said, first service was way louder than you guys. I'm just kidding. They weren't. I just want to rile you up a little bit, get you engaged, get competitive juices flowing. When I was in high school, it was a rule, it was protocol, and I'm glad I've got siblings here to attest, that when we were out late with friends, whether we were hanging out with friends or we had a sporting event or we were getting home from an away game, whatever it was, whenever we came home late and mom and dad were already in bed, already asleep, we were required to go in and wake them up. Parker, did you have to do this? Okay, Parker had to do it too. In my day, it was before text messaging, and we had to actually physically go in and say, "We're home, we're alive, we made it, rest easy." This was a requirement, but this seems like a simple rule, but it brought great fear to my life. I know it brought great fear to my brother's lives. Taylor, I assume you can attest to this as well. But it brought great terror, not because we were afraid to tell mom and dad how late we were out or who we were hanging out with or what we did. It was terrifying because whenever you wake mom up from asleep, she wakes up screaming and yelling, freaked out, makes you wet your pants because she can't just wake up and say, "Oh, I'm glad you're home. Thanks for..." It's, "Russell, get the guns! Who's here?" Like, it's this terrifying freak out, jumping, and so you would try to nudge mom and back away as quick as you can and not let her freak out on you. And it was so scary to wake mom up. So you would try to get around it by waking dad up, Dad, I'm home, And once he would wake up, be like, "All right, thanks for waking me up. Did you tell your mom?" I was like, "No, I did not tell mom." You know what happens when we try to tell mom. She's like, "You should tell your mom." "You should tell my mom that I'm home." It's terrifying because she would just freak out. And we would tell these stories all the time of if Brandon and I were both out, we would try to send each other in. It is the worst thing ever to have to wake up mom from sleep. She said she can't sleep if she doesn't know we're home safe. You can sleep just fine, apparently, without us help. We see in this story, we see the followers of Jesus. Jesus is his boys. They come to a place in their life where their circumstances require that they wake Jesus up from a deep sleep. That Jesus is asleep on the boat, and they have to come wake him up. And it's because their circumstances, their storms, are so overwhelming, they actually think that they're going to die. Now, the story starts a lot more beautiful than the storm. It says in verse 35 that Jesus said, "Let's get into this boat and go to the other side of the sea." That they get in the boat. It says evening had come, so it's evening. Jesus, his disciples, they get in this boat, and it's about a 5-mile journey. I'm not sure how long this would take, but they're going from the west side of the Sea of Galilee over to the east side of the Sea of Galilee. Evening, sun is setting. There's mountains all around the Sea of Galilee. So I'm just envisioning a sunset. We got the stars are starting to come out. This is the end of a long, productive day. If you look at all that Jesus had done, his miracles and his teaching, the disciples get in the boat. This boat, history tells us, is larger than a canoe, but it's not a huge boat. It could hold about 10 to 15 people. We know that we got about 13 grown men in this boat right now, so it's no tiny boat. In fact, history would record that these boats would probably need waves about 7 feet high to get into the boat. So this is a good-sized boat, and they're sailing, and it says that other boats are joining them. So you can just look out at the sea. All these boats are sailing. The sun is setting. It's a calm, beautiful scene. We know there's a lot of fishermen, former fishermen of Jesus' followers, so perhaps they're throwing the nets out, trying to catch some fish. This is a relaxing, enjoyable setting. Jesus, this was his idea. They all got to be patting him on the back awesome idea. We're just going to go relax to call it a night. We'll get away from the crowds. This is a beautiful scene. They're excited that Jesus had this idea. It's important for us to note that Jesus said, "Let's get in the boat and let's travel this way." That Jesus calls them to this moment. Jesus gives them a destination. He gives them direction for the next steps of their life. And this direction includes influence. Now, he gives a lot of details are not given from Jesus. He doesn't tell them that between here and there's going to be a storm. He doesn't tell them the influence that they're going to have on the other side. But if you keep reading, Jesus knew what they were doing and how he was going to use his disciples to set a man free. He didn't give them the details, but he said, it's my idea to get in this boat and we're going to travel this way. So they obey Jesus. They honor Jesus. And he goes to sleep and the disciples begin to sail. It says so they took Jesus in the boat and they started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon a fierce storm came up, and high waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. So what starts as a relaxing scene slowly transitions into chaos. Jesus, this was a good idea, all of a sudden turns into this was a bad idea. That they're sailing, the wind starts picking up, the waves start rocking the boat a little bit. They finally decide, well, this is kind of too rough. Let's bring in the fishing nets. Let's strap some stuff down. Now the waves are 7 feet tall plus crashing in. It says the boat doesn't just have a little water in it, it's filling up with water. The storm is loud. The winds and the waves crashing is great volume. Now the guys are yelling at each other of where to go and what to do and how to adjust the sails. They're holding on to the edge so that they don't fly out of the boat. That chaos breaks loose. What was so beautiful now is a scene of chaos. Meanwhile, verse 38, Jesus is sleeping in the back of the boat. The stern, for those of you who wanted to know. Sleeping in the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. Now, how tired is Jesus? This is not a gentle rocking of the boat that would put you to sleep. This is a massive storm. This is high volume. This is chaos. This is cargo, and Jesus himself sliding back and forth on the boat. Water is filling the boat, creeping up Jesus' body as he's sleeping. And yet Jesus is asleep, which indicates to me that Jesus, although he's present, isn't freaked out like the disciples are. He's still in the storm. The waves and the wind and the chaos is still there, but Jesus isn't as freaked out as the disciples are. And I wonder how much this could relate to us in our lives and the storms that we're in. I think oftentimes we feel like, well, if I am in the presence of a storm, that must mean that Jesus is distant. I want to tell you that the presence of a storm does not mean the absence of Jesus. It just means that Jesus is fully aware that he say we are going to get to the other side of the storm. And since Jesus knows the end of the story, he knows what's on the other shore, and he knows that you're going to arrive there. He's not as panicked in the middle of the storm as you and I are. The storm still exists. He's still getting tossed around by the wind and the waves. But if he already knows this is not the end of the story, the panic, the chaos is much different. I want to tell you that the presence of a storm does not mean the absence of Jesus. That Jesus sees you in your storm. He's not distant from you. He's declared you're going to get to the other side, and he knows you're going to make it. But the disciples, they don't know. So it says they run to him and they wake him up. And it says they wake him up shouting. So these disciples are officially yelling at Jesus. And what they yell at him is they say, "Teacher." They wake him up, "Teacher, don't you care that we are going to drown?" Some translations say, "We are perishing." Jesus, don't you care that I am currently dying? This storm, this circumstance, it is taking me out. We have tried. We've got buckets that we've been trying to throw water out. We've doing whatever we can, and we are not finding any success in our own efforts. The storm is bigger than anything that we've gone through before, and we are going to die. And they make the declaration that if Jesus isn't distant, if Jesus is present in my storm, then he just must not care. We often make the same assumption. First off, Jesus must be distant. And if he's not distant and the storm is still happening, well, then he must not care. Because Jesus, I heard you call me here. I feel like you led me to this job. I feel like this relationship, you gave me the green light on. I feel like this was a good business decision that you led me towards. I thought I was supposed to purchase this. Jesus, you brought me here, and now what seemed beautiful is now chaos. And if you're still with me, you're not doing anything about it. We make the assumption that he must not care. Have you ever been that guy? Wow. It says like, Jesus, I'm really frustrated right now. I've been doing my best to honor you. I've been doing my best to listen to you, to obey you. But right now, this is painful. This hurts. I don't see what's on the other side of the storm. I feel like you brought me here. You cared enough to call me, but you didn't care enough to get me through this. I want to tell you that following Jesus includes seasons of uncertainty, seasons where you don't feel safe. I believe that following Jesus is not a call to a safe life. Now, your soul is safe. Your soul is secure. Your eternity is established. But our days on this earth are not storm-free. They're not free from trial. They're not free from uncertainty. I mean, you look at these disciples, this is the beginning of challenges and storms that they face, that go from a physical storm of wind and waves to them being hunted down, them being arrested, giving up their very lives for their faith. You ask anybody who's followed Jesus consistently for seasons of life, and they'll tell you it's not always certain. It's not always safe. You say yes to Jesus and you follow him somewhere, and when you thought you were obeying, all of a sudden there's chaos all around you. It's not because you did something wrong. It's because there's storms and there's uncertainties when you follow Jesus. I think a lot of following Jesus, there's moments and seasons of our life where we look around and say, what is going on? Like, where are you? And if you're here, why aren't you doing something about this? But what we see in the story is Jesus, he's in the boat. And he has already told them, we're going to get to the other side. This was Jesus' idea. And I want to tell you, if Jesus has called you somewhere, if he has called you to a storm, he will call you through the storm. That there is destination and there is purpose. And although you may be uneasy about your current circumstances, he is taking you to the other side. But what the disciples do, and what we have the tendency to do, is let our circumstances sway our confidence in our Savior. Right. That they were told a promise. Get in the boat, let's go. And they had faith to say, all right, I'm in. Because it's easy right now, it's smooth right now, we're good to go. They had faith they were getting to the other side. But as soon as their circumstances turned, now their circumstances carry more weight than their Savior. They had a choice. They had a decision to make. In this moment, they could make the decision, this storm is so overwhelming, I can't get myself out of it. I can't free myself of this storm. So they could decide either I'm going to believe that I'm going to die, or they can believe I have no idea how Jesus is going to get me out of this, but what a story I'm going to have on the other side. In this moment, they choose the worst possible outcome. They let go of their faith in their Savior and their circumstances. Their wind and their waves was all that they could see. They didn't know what was going to happen, so they declared they were going to die. But it's in these moments we can hold on to the promise. No, Jesus said we're going to the other side. And all there's wind and waves now that weren't here at the beginning. I'm going to say, I believe I'm getting to the other side. I don't know how. I don't know how long the storm's going to last. I don't know what condition I'll be when I get there, but I'm going to have a story to tell. And that story will come with influence. That story will come with purpose. That story is going to grow your faith. Because I even asked the question that, then why the storm? Like, why did Jesus have to lead them through this? But it's because it's seasons of storm that we find growth. Our faith grows. When you get through a storm and Jesus helped you through it, all of a sudden your trust grows. Your confidence in the next storm grows. That your influence grows. That all of a sudden you have a story that's going to help other people with similar storms, and you wouldn't have the ability to help them if you hadn't weathered the storm yourself. So there are storms, seasons of our lives that grow us. Without the storm, there is no story. Without the storm, there isn't the experience to be the influence that God has created you to be. So I think sometimes it's easy for us to make the assumption that if I'm in this storm and Jesus is aware of this storm and yet he's not doing anything to calm this storm, maybe he doesn't love me. Maybe he doesn't really care. But maybe if Jesus knows how this storm is going to build you, how this storm is going to mature you. Maybe the most loving thing Jesus can do is say, no, I see your future. I see your influence. I see that your generations after you are going to be changed because your faith grew in this moment. So no, it's not I don't love you, so I let you go through the storm. It's I love you enough to allow the storm to build the man and the woman I've intended you to be. That's good. That what if we took the perspective of, instead of just complaining about the storm, what if we recognize, Jesus, you called me here, and you're still with me? What if we say to the storm, I don't know why you're here, and I hope you end soon, but Jesus, if you're going to get me through it, and on the other side, I'm going to be a better husband, I'm going to be a better father, I'm going to be a better mother, a better wife, a better parent, I'm going to be a better coworker, a better boss, a better brother, a better sister, a better influencer in my community. If that's where you're taking me, as long as you're sure you're going to get me through this, bring on the storm. What if your storm today is not an indication that God doesn't care? What if your storm today is an indication that He really does care, and He cares about the future people that you will influence enough to allow the storm today? That's good. It's in the storm that they grow. They're going to need a lot more faith as they move forward into the future. I want to be clear that sometimes we experience storms that are a result of our own sin. Sometimes our storms are because we neglected what Jesus was telling us. We went the wrong direction. You get the Jonah moments where He says to go one way, you go another. And some storms are because of our own sins, because we didn't listen to His direction, His guidance in our lives. But I do think some storms are intentional to grow and mature your faith. But God is so good that no matter what the reason for your storm, whether Jesus led you there or you made some poor decisions, that we have an amazing God that uses both storms for your benefit. He is a God who is consistently making beauty out of brokenness. He's finding purpose in the midst of your pain, and He will find a way to use the storm that you are currently walking in. Verse 39, once they woke Him up, it says, Jesus woke up. And the next two words are, He rebuked, which brings me such great comfort that Jesus woke up and rebuked. Anybody else wake up cranky? Just me? Nobody wakes up cranky? He wakes up and he starts rebuking the guy, once he gets woken up. It's easy for me to get cranky and rebuke when I get woken up. You know, our kids will come in and say, you know, they want something to eat. It's like, you know where the kitchen is. Have anything you want, just don't wake me up. You know, just go eat food. I think if I'm Jesus right here and I get woken up because there's a bad storm, I think if it's me, I'd be like, Peter, go ask your mother to calm the storm. Like, just go, give me 5 more minutes and then I'll calm the storm. But Jesus gets up, and it says He rebukes, but He doesn't rebuke the disciples. It says He rebukes the wind, and He says to the waves, be calm, be still. Silence. And suddenly, there was a great calm. So we see Jesus respond to their cries, respond to their needs. But what's interesting about this is if you consider an honest conversation between you and God about what you're currently going through, prayer, what just happened on this boat is prayer. And it wasn't a very delicate prayer. It wasn't a very extensive prayer. They didn't come to Jesus and try to have a really good formula of communicating their desires. They didn't say to Him, you know, if you got some time, if it's within your will. They don't have this, we don't want to bother you. They didn't try to downplay their fear. You know, they didn't try to say that the other guys are more afraid. I'm pretty confident, but we just want to let you know about the storm. In fact, if you look at the content of their prayer, they don't even make a request. They don't ask Him for anything. Their prayer is yelling at Jesus. Don't you care that I am dying right now? With no request. Their prayer had a massive lack of faith. It was incredibly inaccurate and feels a bit rude. But Jesus takes it. I'm so grateful that Jesus' response isn't, hey son, go change your tone of voice before you come and talk to me that way. Like, He doesn't tell them to make their prayer more formal. He doesn't say, give me a dear Heavenly Father at the beginning of this prayer so that I'll listen. He answers. When there was no formal request, He saw them in their point of their need, and He answered because they were honest and they were real. They said, this is what I feel right now. I don't think that you care about me. I don't know why you're not changing my circumstances. I'm overwhelmed. I'm going to die, and you don't seem to care, Jesus. And Jesus takes it. I want to tell you this morning that I think that complaining can be a valid form of prayer. I don't think it should be your only form of prayer, but I think that complaining, saying, Jesus, what in the world right now? If you're here, why is this happening? Why am I still hurting? Why am I still struggling? Why isn't this fixed? Why am I still addicted? Why is this happening right now? We don't have to look any further than David in his Psalms. Almost all of his Psalms are him just crying out complaints. Like he's like, God, what in the world right now? Why are they succeeding and I'm not? Why don't you kill them? Because I'm pretty frustrated right now. I want you to save me and kill them. Like he's overwhelmingly complaining in so many of his Psalms. Right. Yet he's called a man after God's own heart because it's genuine, it's honest, it's what you're truly going through. And they shout out to Jesus, why don't you seem like you're caring? I want to tell you this morning that God can take your complaints. Yeah. He can take your why don't you seem to cares. It says in 2 Peter, there's this verse that says we're to cast all of our cares on Jesus because he cares for you. Yeah, yeah. And the reason that the disciples could yell and throw their concerns and cares at Jesus is because Jesus does care for them. Their perspective is, Jesus, you don't seem to care. But he takes it because he does care. And I love in this verse, it says to cast our cares. I like that it says cast because that's a very demonstrative word. It's not drop off your cares. It's not slide them over. It's not delicately place. I mean, it's throw them. It's hurl them. Chuck your cares at Jesus. Be bold in your concerns. Let him know how difficult life is for you right now because he loves that honesty. That's good. So picture the scene. The waves begin to settle down. It's dark outside. It's calming down. We got Jesus stands up. He's got some bedhead going on, maybe wiping some crusties from a deep sleep. We got the disciples they're breathing heavy because they're just trying to unload all of this water. Adrenaline has just been pumping. Moments ago, they thought they were going to die. They're intense. You got the water dripping off their beards, and it's all calm at this point. They're recovering. And Jesus says, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? Other translations say, where did your faith go? He said, what happened? Like you had faith in me enough to get on the boat. You had faith in me to cast away from the shore. Where'd your faith go? Now that the circumstances are a little bit different than they were when we started this journey together. When you look through at least the history that the Gospels give us, we've seen incredible miracles that these disciples have watched. They've seen Jesus provide food. They've seen him heal the leper. They've actually watched him raise a boy from the dead. Like they've watched it and they have had faith and confidence for the crippled, for the leopard, for the dead. But this is the first time we see that it's the disciples who are in need of a miracle. Every other story, they have had faith on the behalf of somebody else in a place of need. This is the first time that they're the ones in the place of need. Right. Have you ever noticed that it's a lot easier to speak faith into somebody else's storm? When it's somebody else's marriage that's struggling. When it's someone else's financial issue. When someone else has a diagnosis and a sickness. It's a lot easier to speak faith and that God's going to work all things together for the good. And that God knows what he's doing. And he's going to carry you through this. And he who started a work is going to come. It's so much easier to speak faith into someone else's storm. But where is my faith when I'm in the storm? When it's my marriage, when it's my finances, when it's my loss of job, when it's my uncertainty of the future. That they now have to have faith, not just on behalf of the leper, they have to have faith in the middle of their storm. Who's Jesus to you when you're freaking out about your circumstances? Where's your faith when you have no idea what tomorrow is going to hold? He calms the storm, but I love that he challenges their lack of maturing faith. He knows that there's going to be more storms. They got more difficult days ahead, but they got more influence ahead. They got more purpose ahead. He's like, guys, you have to hold on to my promises in the midst of the storms. Then verse 41, the disciples were absolutely terrified. Who is this man? They asked each other. That even the wind and the waves are obeying him. They're fearful. But now their fears transition from the storm to this awe and this wonder of the power of Jesus. What I love about this is the disciples, they thought they knew him. They've walked with Jesus for over a year now. Every day, they've got to know his personality, his character. They've witnessed his power to raise the dead. But in this moment, when it was their lives on the line, and Jesus shows up, and Jesus brings them through the storm and gets them to the other side, they're taken aback once again at how amazing Jesus is. I think that the more that you experience Jesus, the more you have intimate communion with Jesus, the more you realize you still don't know him. Right. He's better than you thought. His love is greater than you thought. When he carries you through a storm and you get to the other side, you realize he knows you better than you know yourself. You realize he never left you in the midst of that. You recognize how he wanted to prepare you for the days that were ahead of you. You realize his love is greater. You realize that when you've made a mistake and you have sinned and you've fallen short, and he still shows up and he carries you and he gets you through that storm. You get to the other side and you realize that he is grace upon grace upon grace, and then I mess up again and he's grace again, and then I'm in another storm and he's grace upon that previous grace. And it's when we go through these storms that we begin to recognize the beauty of Jesus. In fact, sometimes it takes a storm for you to be reintroduced to grace again. And can you just imagine this moment? And worship team, you can come on up. I'm going to wrap this up in just a moment. Can you picture this moment with me as the disciples just went from declaring, "We are dying," to now Jesus calmed the storm. Jesus isn't freaked out. He has a real brief message to them. Where'd your faith go, boys? And then if Jesus is anything like me, he's grabbing his cushion and going back to sleep, getting a few minutes of rest. And as Jesus falls back asleep, and the disciples are catching their breath, and they begin to realize what just happened in these last few minutes. I thought I was going to die, and Jesus showed up. And he's going back to sleep, and we're alive. We're okay. We made it when we didn't think we would. And they begin looking at each other in the eye, just shaking their heads like, what just happened? Finally, one of them speaks up. They said, who is this guy? Like we thought we knew him. We've seen some crazy stuff. He's provided for us for a while now, but he's better. He's better than we thought. He's better than what we've experienced in the past. That this storm reminded them that I don't even know how good Jesus is. I thought I knew. If that was the only benefit of this storm, it was worth it. I want to tell you this morning that sometimes it takes a storm for you to be reintroduced to grace again. Sometimes we have storms to be reintroduced to how good Jesus is again. Sometimes a storm is Jesus saying, hey, I'm still in control. I want you to know that your dependence isn't on how cush life is right now. Your dependence isn't on your paycheck. It's not in your relationships. It's not in your romance. It's not in your kids. It's me. I'm the only way to bring you life and provision and future and a hope. Then maybe your storm is Jesus subtly saying, hey, eyes back on me. I'm your hope. I'm your source. I think a lot of times we get to the other side of the storm. Maybe you've experienced it, or maybe you're in a storm today. But I think when you get to the other side, there's a whole lot of, wow, I was so frustrated at Jesus. I was so hurt that I was walking through that. But when he gets us through, we say, wow, he wasn't mad at me. He wasn't distant. Because if there is no storm, there is no story. And I don't know what the days ahead of my life hold. I don't know what the days ahead of your life hold. But I know that if there's a storm, Jesus is holding my hand, and he's holding your hand. And on the other side is greater influence than you have today, and a greater faith than you have today. And you'll understand the grace of Jesus more than you understand it today. So as long as Jesus, you're going to hold me, you're going to walk with me, I can take on the storm. If you have the ability this morning, would you stand with me? I don't know your wind. I don't know your waves. I don't know the name of your storm. But I know who has power over those winds and over those waves. I'll tell you have a God who loves you. He's not distant. He cares. And he can handle your honesty. Now, to be clear, it's Jesus and only Jesus who can calm the storm. There's not a good formula that if we follow these 3 steps, we're guaranteed a storm-free future. Jesus chooses to calm the storm. But I do think there's some beauty in seeing what the disciples did. What did the followers of Jesus do with the storm? And what they did is they stopped fighting for their own lives. They put their buckets down, their strategies down, and they ran to Jesus. Right. They took their eyes off of the storm, eyes off of their own efforts. They said, Jesus, you're our last shot. You're all we got. And as soon as they let go of their own efforts, their own works, they let go of their eyes being on their storms, and they fixed their eyes on Jesus, this is when Jesus moved. I want to tell you, I don't know how long your storm will last. But I do know our best bet is to take our eyes off of our circumstances. To lay down our buckets, our efforts to rescue ourselves and run to Jesus. Because he's in the boat. He's with us. He's here. Say, Jesus, I'm dying right now. I can't calm the storm by myself. And this is when Jesus responds. And Jesus, in this moment, he exchanged his rest so that they could have it. I'll tell you, this is the gospel. That Jesus exchanges his position with us. That he takes on the chaos, he takes on the burden, he takes on the shame, he takes on the sin and the death, so that we can live in his freedom, in his righteousness, in his rest, and in his peace.